There is a story about a gentleman who knocks on his son's door. "Jamie," he says, "wake up." Jamie answers, "I don't want to get up, Papa." The father shouts, "Get up, you have to go to school." Jamie says, "I don't want to go to school." "Why not?" asks the father. "3 reasons," says Jamie. "First, because it's so dull. Second, the kids tease me. And third, I hate school." And the father says, "Well, I'm going to give you 3 reasons why you must go to school. First, because it is your duty. Second, because you are 45 years old. And third, because you are the headmaster." Father Anthony DeMello, who first told this story, was a Jesuit priest, widely known for his sense of humor and for his books on spirituality. He maintained spirituality means waking up. Most people, even though they don't know it, are asleep. They're born asleep. They live asleep. They marry in their sleep. They breed children in their sleep. They die in their sleep without ever waking up. They never understand the loveliness and the beauty of this thing we call human existence. The disciples in the Gospels, like so many of us, were guilty of sleeping through most of life. And in this morning's text, not only were they physically exhausted, running on fumes and doing their best to function without enough hours of sleep, but they were also spiritually asleep and had been for some time. The disciples are almost always depicted in the Gospels as a bunch of clueless misfits who never quite understood who Jesus was or what his mission was about. They witness Jesus performing miracle after miracle, and still they wonder how the crowds will be fed. They hear one parable after another and still seem oblivious to the dominion of God. They understand Jesus to be a man of peace, but look forward to his overthrow of the Roman Empire. They were asleep. Even though they were walking around and performing their daily routines, it's as if they were sleepwalking through life. And in this morning's text, they appear to be just as asleep as any other day, even though it's a day that they would never forget, a watershed moment, an experience that they would surely carry with them for the rest of their life. Jesus needed to spend some time in prayer, and he wanted his friends, Peter, James, and John, to join them. So he went up on a mountain, and while he was praying, Luke tells us, lo and behold, the appearance of his face changed. Matthew's gospel says it shone like the sun. And not only his face, but his clothes were described as dazzling. If you're having trouble imagining it, picture in your head a beautiful drag queen under the spotlights in a sequin-studded evening gown. No? Worked for me. But if that wasn't enough to wake the disciples up, they saw Jesus talking to dead people who weren't dead anymore. Moses, the lawgiver, and Elijah, the most famous of prophets. It was a close encounter of the spiritual kind, a Mount Rushmore of spiritual heroes. But true to form, the disciples didn't see it that way. They saw it as a dazzling light show. They understood that they were fortunate enough to be witnessing an amazing event, but they had no understanding of its significance. And so Peter tried to do what so many of us try to do when we have a life-changing experience. He tried to freeze it in time. He was at least ahead of the game by understanding that transformational experiences are by their very nature transitory. He knew that over time the dazzle of the experience would fade. And so in his very human attempt at holding on to that moment, he tried to freeze the experience by suggesting the construction of 3 dwellings or monuments. But in our attempt to freeze an experience, to freeze our understanding of God, to create our own God in a box, we end up freezing ourselves, and we miss out on the next gift that's being given to us. And so God entered the stage in an attempt to wake up Peter and the other 2 disciples. They were engulfed in a cloud, out of which a voice said, "This is my son, the chosen. Listen to him." It's as if to say, since you seem to have been missing the point for the last 3 years, I'm going to spell it out for you. This is my chosen one. And so quit your babbling, and for once, just shut up and listen. Don't try to freeze this spiritual experience in time, and don't try to explain it. Just open your eyes and experience it for what it is. And God's direct approach seemed to have made an impression, because the story closes by telling us that they indeed did shut up, and they didn't try to explain their inexplicable experience to anyone they encountered. Although the story describes Jesus as being transfigured, I like to think that the disciples walked away from their mountaintop experience as transfigured people. You and I spend much of our life just as asleep as the disciples. We tend to try and freeze in time our mountaintop experiences, the spiritual moments that give us a good feeling. And consequently, we miss out on the gifts that God has for us in our everyday life. We imagine that we will find God within a church, hear God in a sermon, and experience God in communion, which all may be very true. But we need to be careful to not leave God up on the mountain, enshrined in our memory as we re-enter the world. If we do, then we remain asleep. And in the words of Father Anthony DeMello, we will never understand the loveliness and the beauty of this thing we call human existence. There's a group of us that gathers every other Saturday for a half hour of guided meditation. We stop our busyness for a brief period and listen to the voice of God in the steady rhythm of our breath. At the end of the half hour, we are almost always like the disciples in our resistance to come down from the mountaintop and re-enter the world. We would much prefer to keep our eyes closed and freeze the moment in time and remain for just a bit longer. But if we do, we miss out on the many other ways to experience God. We experience God not only in the silence of meditation, but we experience God in the presence of other people. We experience God in the nature that surrounds us. We experience God in art and music. A man known simply as Brother Lawrence, who lived in the 17th century and who is remembered for his habit of continual conversation with God, experienced God in his daily routine of peeling potatoes and washing pots and pans. Julian of Norwich realized within something as small and simple as a hazelnut that God is our creator, protector, and lover. God is waiting to be experienced in the everydayness of life. But we can only encounter God if we are living our lives with our eyes wide open. We can only experience God's love as we make ourselves vulnerable to the people all around us. We can only hear that we are the chosen ones as we open ourselves to the still small voice that points out that he is also chosen, and she is chosen, and they are too. And when that happens, and we encounter God in everyone around us, when we experience the sacred in everything that has been created, then we will finally find ourselves waking up to the miracle of life, and we will be transfigured. God calls us down from our mountaintop experiences. As wonderful and transformational as they may have been, there is more to come. Much, much more. Once we have opened our eyes, we will understand that not only are we transfigured, but we are called to transfigure different situations in life. God calls us from our mountaintops so we can transform the world, even as we have been transformed. We are called to be God's voice of justice, to share God's spirit of love, and to bring God's healing presence into a world that desperately needs it. May God open our eyes and our ears to our calling. May we experience our transfiguration and re-enter the world as agents of transfiguration. Amen.